The stars had been silent for 3,000 years. The Galactic Concord had mapped every corner of known space, every species, and recorded every planet worth recording. Commander had served on exploration vessels for over 200 cycles, and he believed he had seen everything the universe had to offer. He was wrong. The bridge of the conquered ship Eternal Light hummed with activity. Stood at the center, his tall form casting a long shadow across the polished floor. His species, had 4 arms and eyes that could see in spectrums most beings could not imagine. He used all 4 arms now to manipulate the holographic display before him. "Commander," said his navigation officer, a small furry creature named, "we are detecting something unusual at coordinates 773. Turned his large head slowly. In his experience, unusual meant trouble. Define unusual. Whiskers twitched nervously. "A vessel, sir, drifting. No power signatures but the metal composition. I have never seen anything like it." The commander walked to the navigation station and looked at the readings himself. The numbers made no sense. The alloys in that ship should not exist together. They were too heavy, too dense, too primitive. And yet there they were, floating in the darkness of space like a ghost from a forgotten age. "How old?" asked. "At least 400 standard cycles," replied. "Maybe more. The nuclear decay signatures suggest early space travel technology, very early." Felt something he rarely felt, curiosity, and beneath that something else, something like fear. "Bring us closer, slowly." The Eternal Light moved through space like a great whale through dark waters. As they approached, the unknown vessel came into view on the main screen. It was small compared to their ship. Rough and angular where conquered vessels were smooth and elegant. It looked like something a child might build from spare parts, and yet it had survived centuries in the void. Scholar entered the bridge. She was from the thinking species, beings who had devoted their entire civilization to knowledge. Her body was thin and fragile, but her mind was sharper than any blade. She carried a data tablet in her delicate hands. "I heard we found something interesting," she said. Her voice was soft like wind through leaves. "See for yourself," replied, gesturing at the screen. Studied the vessel for a long moment. Then she pulled up her tablet and began scanning the markings on its hull. The symbols were strange, blocky, primitive, but there was something familiar about them. "Commander," she said slowly, "I need to access the old archives, the very old archives." "Why?" "Because I think I recognize these markings." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "They match records from Planet 3 of the Sol system." The bridge went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing. Even the ship itself seemed to hold its breath. Felt ice spread through his body. "That is impossible. Sol 3 is a class 15. Nothing survives there. Nothing intelligent, at least." "The records say otherwise," replied. "Before the Conquered established the classification system, there were reports, stories, really, about creatures that lived on that world. Creatures that breathed poison air and drank liquid that would dissolve most organic matter. Creatures that hunted other creatures for food." "Myths," said firmly, "tales to frighten young ones." "Perhaps," looked at the vessel again, "but that ship came from somewhere, and these markings, they are definitely from Sol 3, from a place the natives called Earth." The word hung in the air like a curse. Earth, the forbidden planet, the world that no conquered species would approach. It was listed in every navigation computer as a Class 15, the highest danger rating possible. Its atmosphere was corrosive. Its star produced deadly radiation. Its surface was covered in liquid hydrogen oxide that could destroy most known life forms. And worst of all, it had predators. Endless predators. The entire ecosystem was designed around killing and eating. "If this vessel truly came from Earth," said carefully, "then we have a much bigger problem than an old ship." "What do you mean?" asked. "A ship does not build itself. Someone made this vessel. Someone launched it into space. Someone from a Class 15 figured out how to leave their planet and travel among the stars. The bridge crew exchanged worried looks. The implications were terrifying. A species that could survive Earth would be unlike anything the Conquered had ever encountered. They would be strong beyond measure, aggressive beyond reason, and if they had mastered space travel. "We need to board that ship," said. "We need to know what we are dealing with." Nodded slowly. He did not want to board that vessel. Every instinct told him to turn around and fly away as fast as possible. But he was a commander of the Galactic Conquered. He had duties. He had responsibilities. "Prepare a boarding team," he ordered. "Full protective gear, weapons authorized, and someone wake up our human observers." The last order caused more silence. The human observers, two beings who had joined the crew 6 months ago as part of a cultural exchange program. They were quiet and polite and kept mostly to themselves. They ate strange food and exercised constantly and smiled with their teeth showing. Had always found them slightly unsettling, though he could never explain why. Now, looking at that ancient vessel floating in the void, he thought he might be starting to understand. In their quarters on the lower deck, Officer opened his eyes. He had heard the commander's order through the ship's communication system. Beside him, Lieutenant was already sitting up, her dark hair falling around her shoulders. "They found something," she said quietly. Nodded. He had felt it the moment they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. A pull, a connection, something calling to him from across the centuries. "They found us," he replied, "or at least they found where we started." Looked at him with eyes that held thousands of years of history. "What do we do?" "We do what we always do," said, standing up and reaching for his uniform. "We watch, we wait, and when the time comes we show them who we really are." Outside, in the cold emptiness of space, the ancient vessel waited. It had been waiting for 400 years. It had carried the hopes and dreams of a desperate species across the void. It had failed in its original mission, but perhaps it would succeed in another way. Perhaps it would finally introduce humanity to the galaxy. Whether the galaxy was ready for that introduction was another matter entirely. Commander stood on his bridge and stared at the ship on his screen. He did not know it yet, but his entire understanding of the universe was about to change. Everything the Conquered believed about Class 15, about evolution, about the limits of survival, was about to be challenged. And at the center of that challenge would be two quiet officers who ate strange food and smiled with their teeth. The discovery had been made. Now came the hard part. The boarding shuttle detached from the eternal light with a soft hiss. Inside, 6 beings sat in uncomfortable silence. Commander had selected his best officers for this mission, handled the navigation. 2 security guards from the warrior species called the stood ready with weapons. Scholar clutched her tablet like a shield, and in the back, watching everything with quiet eyes, sat in. The ancient vessel grew larger in the shuttle's windows. Up close, it looked even more primitive than before. The hull was covered in small dents and scratches. Burns marked where micrometeorites had struck over the centuries. Paint had faded and peeled away, but the basic structure remained solid. Whatever species had built this ship, they had built it to last. "Approaching docking port," announced. "Or what I think is a docking port. The design is very different from ours." "Can you connect?" asked. "I can try. The mechanisms are mechanical rather than magnetic, very old technology, but also very simple. Simple usually means reliable." The shuttle attached to the ancient vessel with a loud clang. The sound echoed through both ships like a bell announcing their arrival. For a moment, nobody moved, then stood up and checked his protective suit one final time. "Remember your training," he said to his team. "We do not know what we will find in there. The atmosphere may be toxic. The structure may be unstable. Stay together and report everything you see." And exchanged a quick look. They knew exactly what the team would find. They had studied the old records. They had read the histories. This was one of the colony ships from Earth's first expansion, a desperate attempt to spread humanity across the stars before the planet's resources ran out. Most of those ships had disappeared. Now they knew what had happened to at least one of them. The airlock opened with a grinding sound. The air that rushed out was stale and cold. Stepped inside first, his suit lights illuminating the darkness. The corridor was narrow. The ceiling was low. Everything was built for creatures smaller than the interesting proportions, noted, recording everything with her tablet. The builders were approximately 1.5 to 2 meters tall, bipedal, forward-facing eyes based on the control panel heights, classic predator arrangement. Predators, one of the guards muttered nervously. Of course they were predators. They moved deeper into the ship. The corridors twisted and turned in ways that made little sense to the alien minds. There were symbols on the walls, words in a language none of them could read, except for, and who read them silently and felt their hearts ache with recognition. Storage Bay 3, Medical Center, Crew Quarters, signs pointing to places where their ancestors had lived and worked and dreamed of new worlds. Here, said suddenly, he had found a door larger than the others. This looks important. The door was stuck. Centuries of cold vacuum had sealed it shut. The guards tried to force it open but failed, then stepped forward. "May I try?" he asked politely. Looked at him with surprise. The human was smaller than the thinner, less muscular, but there was something in his eyes that made the commander step aside. Placed his hands on the door. He took a deep breath. Then he pushed. The metal groaned. It bent, and then it gave way with a shriek that echoed through the dead ship. The alien stared at him, simply smiled and stepped back. "The cold made it brittle," he explained. "Just needed the right angle." Hid her own smile. The cold had nothing to do with it. Earth's gravity was stronger than most worlds. Humans were built dense, built powerful, built to survive things that would kill any other species in the galaxy. Inside the room they found them. The crew, 37 bodies perfectly preserved by the vacuum of space. They lay in rows on the floor, arranged neatly, respectfully. They had not died in panic. They had died in peace, accepting their fate with dignity. Approached the nearest body with trembling hands. It was female, young. Her eyes were closed and her face was calm. She wore a simple uniform with strange symbols on the chest. Around her neck hung a small pendant with a photograph inside. "Remarkable," whispered. "They look so peaceful." "They knew they were dying," said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. The ship's systems were failing. They had no way to repair them, so they gathered together. They said goodbye to each other, and they waited for the end. "How do you know this?" demanded. Pointed to the walls. They were covered in writing, messages, final words. "I can read their language. These are their last thoughts, their hopes, their regrets, their love for the families they left behind." The aliens fell silent. This was not what they had expected. They had come looking for monsters, for dangerous predators from a deadly world. Instead, they had found people, beings who loved and feared and hoped just like them. Continued her examination. She scanned the bodies carefully, recording every detail. As she worked, her expression changed from curiosity to confusion to something close to horror. "Commander," she said, her voice shaking, "I am finding something very strange." "What is it?" "Their biology. It is wrong, impossible." She looked at her tablet, then at the bodies, then at her tablet again. "These creatures have immune systems that attack foreign organisms. Their blood carries oxygen using iron. Iron, Commander, the most reactive metal in the universe. And their bones. Their bones are reinforced with calcium deposits. They are built like war machines." Felt cold despite his heated suit. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that these creatures evolved on a world so dangerous that their bodies became weapons. They did not just survive their planet. They conquered it. They became the apex predators of a Class 15. The guards raised their weapons nervously. The bodies on the floor suddenly seemed much more threatening than before. "There is more," continued. "Their genetic structure. It matches something in our databases, something I never expected." She turned and looked directly at End. Her eyes were wide with realization. "It matches you," she whispered. "These creatures, they are the same species as you." The room went completely silent. Every alien turned to stare at the two human observers, and stood calmly, neither confirming nor denying the accusation. "Is this true?" demanded. Are you from Earth?" Looked at the commander for a long moment. Then he looked at the bodies of his ancestors, lying peacefully on the cold metal floor. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "Yes," he said simply. "We are human. We are from Earth. We are children of a class 15, and we have been living among you for a very long time." The truth was out. The secret that humanity had kept for centuries was finally revealed. And as the aliens stared at them with fear and wonder, and knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Outside, the ancient ship floated silently in space. Inside, two species stood face to face. One had traveled across the galaxy seeking knowledge and peace. The other had crawled out of hell itself and learned to walk among the stars. The boarding was complete. Now came the reckoning. The shuttle ride back to the eternal light was silent. The aliens sat as far from and as possible, pressing themselves against the walls like prey hiding from predators. Only continued to watch them with her sharp scientist eyes, recording observations on her tablet. When they docked, Commander immediately ordered into the medical bay. They went without protest. They had known this moment would come eventually. They had prepared for it for years. The medical bay was bright and clean. Machines hummed softly as the ship's doctor, a gentle being named, ran every test he could think of. Blood samples, tissue samples, brain scans, genetic mapping. With each result, his face grew paler. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, running the tests again. "The numbers make no sense." "What have you found?" asked. He stood in the corner, keeping his distance from the humans like they might explode at any moment. Pulled up a holographic display. It showed two bodies side by side. One was a standard conquered species. The other was human. "Look at the differences," said. "Their muscle density is 3 times higher than normal. Their bones can withstand impacts that would shatter ours. Their hearts pump blood at pressures that would kill any other species. And their brains," he paused, struggling to find words. "Their brains are designed for combat, for survival. Every neural pathway is optimized for threat detection and response." "We are not dangerous," said calmly. "We have lived among you for months. Have we hurt anyone?" "Not yet," replied coldly. "But now we know what you are capable of." Leaned forward. What we are capable of and what we choose to do are very different things. Humans learned long ago that strength without control is meaningless. We control ourselves. We always have. The door opened and entered. She carried a data tablet loaded with information. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I have been researching," she said, "going through every record in the conquered archives, every myth, every legend, every story dismissed as impossible." She looked at and with new eyes. "You have been in the galaxy longer than we thought, much longer." "How long?" asked. "Centuries, perhaps 1,000 years or more. The first human ships left Earth during what they called their Great Expansion. Most were colony ships like the one we found. They scattered across the galaxy, landing on different worlds, integrating with different species." The aliens exchanged shocked looks. 1,000 years. Humans had been walking among them for 1,000 years, and no one had noticed. "Why hide?" demanded. "Why pretend to be something you are not?" Smiled sadly. "Would you have welcomed us if you knew the truth? Would any species welcome creatures from a class 15? We saw how the galaxy reacted to dangerous species. We saw what happened to the aggressive ones. They were hunted, contained, destroyed. He shook his head. We did not want that fate, so we hid. We adapted. We became peaceful traders and scholars and diplomats. We showed only our gentlest side. But you are not gentle, said, looking at his medical data. Your bodies are weapons. Your instincts are those of predators. How can you claim to be peaceful? Stood up slowly. Every alien in the room tensed, but she only walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Do you know what it means to evolve, Anna? She asked quietly. It means every day is a battle. It means everything around you wants to kill you. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the water and air. Earth was not kind to us. It tried to destroy us for millions of years. She turned back to face them. But we survived. We adapted. We became strong enough to master our world. And then we looked up at the stars and asked ourselves a question. What do we do with this strength? Do we conquer? Do we destroy? Do we become what our planet tried to make us? Some of us wanted that, added. Some humans believed we should rule the galaxy, take what we wanted by force. We had the power. We had the ability. But most of us chose a different path. What path? Asked, genuinely curious. The path of control, the path of choice. We decided that our strength would be used to protect, not to harm, to build, not to destroy, to help, not to conquer. Stood up and walked to stand beside. Every human you have ever met has been fighting a battle inside themselves. The battle between what we could do and what we should do, and every day we choose peace. The room fell silent. The aliens were struggling to process everything they had heard. Their entire understanding of the universe was being rewritten. Class 15 were supposed to be barren wastelands of death. Nothing was supposed to survive there, let alone develop intelligence and space travel. The cultural exchange program, said slowly, realization dawning. It was not just about learning from us. It was about showing us who you really are. Partly, admitted. Humanity has been debating for generations whether to reveal ourselves. Some believe we should stay hidden forever. Others think the time for secrets has passed. The cultural exchange was a test. We wanted to see if the galaxy was ready to know the truth. And is it? Asked. And looked at each other. There was a conversation in that look, 1,000 years of hope and fear and uncertainty passing between them in an instant. We do not know, finally answered. That depends on you, on how you react, on what you do with this information. Stepped forward. His fear was still there, but something else was growing alongside it. Respect, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. You have been among us for 1,000 years, he said. You could have conquered us at any time, you did not. You could have used your strength to dominate, you did not. Instead, you served on our ships. You helped our scientists. You traded fairly with our merchants. He paused. Why, if you are truly as powerful as the data suggests, why choose to be our equals instead of our masters? Smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine, and for the first time the aliens did not see teeth as weapons. They saw something else. They saw hope. Because that is what it means to be human, she said. We come from a world that taught us to fight, but we learned something more important along the way. We learned that the greatest victory is not defeating your enemies. It is making them your friends. The revelation was complete. Humanity's secret was out. Now came the hard part. Now the galaxy had to decide whether to fear the children of Earth or accept them as they truly were. And in the medical bay of the eternal light, surrounded by beings who had every reason to hate and fear them, two humans stood tall and waited for judgment. The message spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species in the galactic conquered knew the truth. Humans were real. They came from a class 15, and they had been living among the stars for 1,000 years. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. On 100 worlds, panic erupted. Species that had never known fear suddenly remembered ancient instincts buried deep in their genes. The prey remembered what it felt like to be hunted. Commander received orders from the conquered High Council within a day. Bring the humans to the capital world, immediately. Do not let them out of your sight. Do not let them communicate with anyone. And whatever you do, do not make them angry. Read the orders over his shoulder and laughed softly. They think we are animals, he said, monsters that will attack if provoked. Can you blame them? Replied. He was standing closer to the humans now. The fear was still there, but curiosity had begun to replace it. Your species survived things that would destroy entire civilizations. The data we collected from that ship. Your ancestors faced radiation storms, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and predators that could tear through metal, and they kept going. They built ships. They reached for the stars. That kind of determination is terrifying. Determination is not the same as aggression, pointed out. We survived because we had to, not because we wanted to hurt anyone. The Council does not see the difference. The journey to the capital world took 3 weeks. During that time and remained in their quarters, watched constantly by nervous guards. They did not complain. They understood the fear they had caused. They had seen it before, on other worlds and other times, whenever humans were discovered. Visited them often. Her scientific curiosity had overcome her initial terror. She had thousands of questions about Earth, about human evolution, about the first expansion, and answered as best they could. They showed her pictures from there, mountains and oceans and forests and deserts, cities that touched the sky, machines that circled the planet, the blue marble floating in the darkness of space, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. It is strange, said one evening. Looking at these images, I feel both wonder and horror. Your world is magnificent, but everything in it seems designed to kill. It is, agreed. That is what made us who we are. We had to become strong to survive, but strength alone would not have saved us. We also had to become smart, cooperative. We had to learn to work together, to build communities, to care for each other. Without that, we would have died out long ago. Your strength comes from unity. Our strength comes from choice, corrected. Every day, every human chooses to be better than their instincts. We choose cooperation over competition. We choose peace over war. We choose to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. That is the true lesson of Earth. Survival is not enough. We must survive together. When they finally reached the capital world and were escorted to the great chamber of the conquered, it was an enormous room, large enough to hold representatives from every species in the galaxy. Thousands of beings sat in tiered seats that rose toward a distant ceiling. At the center was a raised platform where the accused would stand and walk to that platform with their heads held high. They did not look like prisoners. They looked like ambassadors arriving at a foreign court. This made the watching aliens even more nervous. High Counselor Morn presided over the assembly. He was ancient even by standards, his skin wrinkled and his forearms thin with age. But his eyes were sharp and his voice was strong. You stand before the Galactic Conquered, he announced. You have been accused of deception, of infiltrating our society under false pretenses, of hiding the true nature of your species from the civilized worlds. How do you respond? Stepped forward. We do not deny what we are. We are human. We are from Earth. But we deny that our presence is a threat. We have lived among you in peace for generations. We have contributed to your science, your art, your culture. We have asked for nothing but the chance to exist alongside you. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some were angry, others were confused. A few, surprisingly, seemed sympathetic. You come from Morn continued. Your biology makes you dangerous beyond measure. Your strength, your endurance, your resilience. These things make you a threat to every species in the conquered. Our biology makes us capable of danger, replied. But capability is not intent. We are capable of many things. We choose which actions to take, and we have chosen peace. An angry voice rose from the crowd. Words are cheap. You could turn on us at any moment. Your ancestors were predators, killers. You cannot change what you are. Turned toward the voice. It came from one of the warrior species. His scales were bristling with aggression, and his clawed hands gripped the railing of his seat. "You are right," said calmly. "We cannot change what we are. We are predators. We are survivors of the harshest world in the known universe. But let me ask you something." He paused, making sure everyone was listening. "How many humans have you met in your lifetime?" They hesitated. "Several. They worked on trading ships, merchants and pilots." "And did any of them harm you? Did they attack you? Did they use their strength against you?" "No," they admitted reluctantly. "They were peaceful, friendly even." "That is humanity," said, addressing the entire chamber now. "Every human you have ever met, every trader and scholar and pilot and laborer, they all made the same choice. They chose to be gentle. They chose to be kind. Not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to control themselves." The chamber fell silent. The words hung in the air, challenging everything the conquered believed about strength and danger and what it meant to be civilized. High Counselor Morn leaned forward. "You speak of choice, but what guarantee do we have that humanity will continue to choose peace? What happens when your people decide that cooperation is no longer in their interest?" Smiled. "The same thing that happens with any species. The same thing that could happen with thee or any other people in this room. Every civilization is capable of violence. Every species has the potential for destruction. The question is not whether we could harm you. The question is whether we will." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from 100 different worlds. "We have walked among you for 1,000 years. We have had countless opportunities to conquer, to dominate, to take what we wanted by force. We did not. We chose a different path. That is our guarantee, not words or promises, but 1,000 years of actions." The debate continued for hours. Some called for humanity to be expelled from conquered space. Others argued for containment. A few brave voices spoke in defense of the humans, pointing to their long history of peaceful cooperation. Through it all and stood firm. They did not plead. They did not beg. They simply told the truth and waited for the galaxy to make its decision. The fear was real. The danger was real. But so was the hope that maybe, just maybe, the universe was big enough for everyone. The debate in the Great Chamber lasted for 7 days. 7 days of arguments and accusations and fear. 7 days of and standing on that platform, answering the same questions over and over again. Were humans dangerous? Could they be trusted? What should the conquered do with creatures from a class 15? On the 8th day, something unexpected happened. A small delegation arrived from the Outer Rim territories. They were not officials or diplomats. They were ordinary citizens, a merchant, an engineer, a thinking species teacher, and a dozen others from different worlds and different backgrounds. They had traveled for weeks to reach the capital, and they had one thing in common. They all knew humans personally. The merchant was the first to speak. His name was, and his voice trembled with emotion as he addressed the council. 30 years ago, he said, my ship was attacked by pirates. My crew was killed. My cargo was stolen. I was left drifting in space with a failing life support system. He paused to steady himself. A human trading vessel found me. They could have ignored my distress signal. They could have taken what little I had left. Instead, they saved my life. They shared their food and water with me. They brought me to the nearest station and paid for my medical care out of their own pockets. When I asked why, they said it was simply the right thing to do. The engineer spoke next. Her name was, and she was missing one arm, the stump covered by a mechanical replacement. I worked in the mines of Sector 7, she said. Dangerous work, deadly work. When the tunnel collapsed, I was trapped. My arm was crushed. I was going to die. Her voice hardened. 3 humans came for me. They dug through rock with their bare hands. They lifted beams that would have broken my spine to move. When one of them was injured, the others kept working. They did not stop until they reached me. One of them carried me out on his back, through passages too narrow for rescue equipment. He walked for 6 hours without rest. One by one, the delegation shared their stories. The teacher whose human colleague had protected her students during a building fire. The pilot whose human navigator had stayed behind to fix a broken engine while the rest of the crew escaped. The doctor whose human assistant had worked for 3 days without sleep to save victims of a plague. The chamber listened in silence. These were not diplomatic words or careful arguments. These were real experiences from real beings who had witnessed human nature firsthand. When the last story was told, stepped forward again. "I know the official reports say humans are dangerous," he said. "I know the science says they come from a world of death, but I also know what I have seen with my own eyes. I have seen humans help strangers without asking for anything in return. I have seen them sacrifice their own comfort for the benefit of others. I have seen them choose kindness when cruelty would have been easier." He looked directly at the High Council. "If that is what comes from then perhaps we have been thinking about wrong." High Counselor Morn called for a recess. The representatives returned to their delegations to discuss what they had heard, and remained on the platform, but they were no longer alone. The members of the delegation stayed with them, a small group of aliens surrounding 2 humans in a show of solidarity. "Thank you," said quietly too. "You did not have to come here." The old merchant smiled. "The human who saved me said something I have never forgotten. He said that fear is easy, trust is hard, but trust is what makes us civilized." He shrugged. "I am just paying forward what was given to me." When the assembly reconvened, High Counselor Morn addressed the chamber with a different tone than before. He still looked old and tired, but there was something new in his eyes, something like hope. "The Galactic Concord was founded on a simple principle," he began. "That all intelligent life deserves respect and the opportunity to participate in the greater community of civilizations. For centuries, we have upheld this principle. We have welcomed new species. We have resolved conflicts through diplomacy. We have chosen cooperation over conquest." He turned to look at it. "Humanity presents us with a unique challenge. They come from a world that should have destroyed them. They possess strength that could overwhelm us. They have lived among us in secret for generations. By every logical measure, we should fear them." The chamber held its breath. "But logic is not wisdom," Morn continued. "And fear is not justice. For 1,000 years, humans have walked beside us. They have served on our ships, worked in our cities, contributed to our societies. They have had countless opportunities to use their strength against us. They have not. They have chosen, again and again, to be our partners rather than our conquerors." He rose from his seat, a gesture of respect that made the entire assembly gasp. "The Galactic Concord hereby extends formal recognition to humanity as a full member species. Their past deception is forgiven, given the circumstances that necessitated it. They will have the same rights and responsibilities as any other member of our community." The chamber erupted. Some cheered, others protested. Many simply sat in stunned silence, but the decision was made. Humanity was no longer hiding in the shadows. They were part of the galaxy at last. And stood on the platform, tears streaming down their faces. 1,000 years of secrecy had come to an end. 1,000 years of hiding who they were, of pretending to be less than they were, of fearing discovery and rejection. It was over. Pushed through the crowd to reach them, she grabbed hands and squeezed them tightly. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "We did nothing," replied. "The people who told their stories did it. The humans who saved lives and helped strangers did it. We just stood here and waited." Commander approached more slowly. He still carried himself with military stiffness, but his expression had softened. "I owe you an apology," he said too. "I treated you as a threat from the moment I learned the truth. I was wrong." Shook his head. "You were careful. There is nothing wrong with being careful. The universe is a dangerous place." "It is," agreed, "but perhaps it is a little less dangerous now." That evening and returned to the eternal light. They stood together at the observation window, watching the capital world shrink behind them. Somewhere out there, Humans on 1,000 different worlds were receiving the news. The secret was out. They could finally be themselves. "What happens now?" asked. Put his arm around her shoulders. "Now we do what we have always done. We work, we help, we build. We show the galaxy that children of it can be more than survivors. We can be friends." The stars stretched out before them, countless points of light in the infinite darkness. Somewhere among them was Earth, the world that had made humanity what they were. A world of death and danger and impossible odds. A world that had forged them into the strongest, most resilient species in the galaxy. And the most compassionate. Smiled, looking out at the universe that was finally ready to accept them. "We were never meant to be caged," she said softly. "No," agreed. "We were meant to be free, and now at last we are." The eternal light jumped to faster than light speed, carrying them toward whatever adventures waited ahead. Behind them, the ancient colony ship still floated in the void, a monument to human determination and hope. It had failed in its original mission, but it had succeeded in something greater. It had introduced humanity to the galaxy. And the galaxy would never be the same.